Yo guys, this is Floopes 900.
And hello, I am Soul Courage, accompanying Floopes in a nice matter of what Five Nights at Freddy's lore truly is. Now, first I need to get off my chest that Scott Cawthon, God help us all. You are a clever bastard. But there's another thing that needs to be put to rest. Game theory. You said you were close. You were close. But you overlooked some things, and one really major thing in your analysis. And while as much as I love your stuff, it hurts that you missed something so big. Especially since you went through the lore and know it, and you've done videos on it. But hopefully I can rectify that, and let's get to the actual video. Anything to add, Floopes?
No, I'm just...
What are you doing in the background, Floopes?
I was sitting here, well, I'm basically singing to myself because rectify made me think of erection, and then... go on. Just go on. Please continue. Okay.
Oh God, Floopes. You and your dirty, dirty mind. When will it end?
Never.
Let's hope your fans like it, though.
They should. If they don't...
Let's hope Five Nights at Freddy's community will be willing to take your dirtiness.
They'll have to be.
But let's start off with some simple facts. When you look at the bed in the game, there's a chance that you can see one of three things. An IV, intravenous drip, medication, unknown type, and a vase of flowers. Now, these things indicate that this kid is in recovery in some way, most likely from physical trauma, as is shown in one of the later 8-bit Atari-like video bits. But let's look at that. Let's look at the one with the actual incident. And here's where the gaping hole in game theory's entire video is. The incident happened up on a stage. Now, while this alone may not seem like too big a detail, but if you look back, the phone guy specifically said that the animatronics were not allowed to roam anymore because of the bite of 87. Now, that means a roaming animatronic created the bite of 87. And this was not one that was in roam mode. This was one that was up on stage singing, which helps to prove that this particular incident is not the bite of 87. While we'll be getting to everything about the bite of 87 a little bit later in this video, that right there proves this is not the bite of 87, but a different incident in 1983 as proven of the year by Fazbear and Friends, 1983. Nothing was mistake, nothing got rushed in Scott Cawthon's game. I honestly theorize he's halfway done by the time he released Five Nights at Freddy's 3. But the thing is that we need to now look at the animatronics themselves. Now, they're very Freddy Krueger-ish, as you can probably have seen from the picture, which Floopes has been posting at some point in this video. But there's a few odd things. First, the little plush trap, and then how the only truly scary animatronic, past what a child's mind can create, which can be utterly terrifying sometimes, is the Golden Freddy and Nightmare. But let's look at the basic animatronics. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy. Now, these four animatronics appear in normal nights, except for the final night which you face off with Golden Freddy, which is a highly stress-inducing fight right there. But let's look at the way they act, because that actually proves something very important about what they actually are. Because everything has meaning in this thing, and it's not what you think it is. Because Scott Cawthon, you goddamn troll. But, now, let's look at Foxy in particular. Because he doesn't do his normal thing. He doesn't bum rush you like normal. Instead, he goes and hides in the closet. Now, if you notice, the kid's older brother is always wearing this Foxy mask. And he's always hiding and scaring him from various locations. Now, I theorize that the animatronics represent the kid's older brother and his friends who were wearing masks of Freddy, Chica, and Bonnie at the time of the incident. And thus his fear of them, which was also amplified by his fear of the animatronics, got placed into the animatronics, and that's why they act the way they act, why Chica and Bonnie will hide if they're at the end of the hallway and you spot them before they start heading down it. They'll hide instead of staying where they are, which is very bizarre for the usual animatronic movement pattern that Scott Cawthon is based in the rest of the games. They don't move unless you're not really looking at them. But these ones will. Now, we need to next look at what this is starting to mean. Well, we now know that the year is set in 1983, that the animatronics aren't really the animatronics, but the kid's older brothers and his friends, and that this kid has been in serious trauma due to the incident. Now, it's possible that the room itself is in the child's head along with all the animatronics, which is a pretty high likelihood theory, or child services could have stepped in and this is him partially in a dream world, in a sense. Or he's just utterly terrified inside of a house he's not very familiar with. Now, we need to look at the gold Freddy. Now, obviously, this is the source of the trauma, which is why it has the source of blood on it. There's blood all over this thing. And it acts like no other animatronic. It acts in a much scarier fashion, constantly moving around and able to warp to any point which an animatronic would normally be at. The Freddy is usually under the bed and sends up his little, toy Freddys onto the bed until there's too many, and then he comes out and pops out and scares you. And then he can also be in the closet where Freddy be and at both doors, and he just runs around hurriedly. But that shows that since he's basically the final boss, that he is the source of the trauma, which you usually would figure out by that point. Now, there's nothing really special about that. He's the source of the trauma, so he's going to be super scary. Nothing too out of the ordinary. But let's look at Nightmare. Nightmare is very different. He acts the same manner, but whenever he's on the bed, just that head on the bed, he's missing his frontal lobe. Now, since this thing is made of darkness, I'm theorizing that this is an animatronic, which is literal foreshadowing. It's foreshadowing that this kid, while part of the incident in 1983, is also going to be in another incident in 1987. Now, once again, we're going to put 1987 aside. Next, we'll want to look at Plush Trap, the little spring trap. He doesn't act like any other in the sense that he helps you. He helps skip 2 hours ahead in time if you can get him on the X. Now, what could this mean? Well, my guess is that Springtrap is the anti-anxiety medicine that this kid would be taking because of such a traumatic event. And getting him on the X is taking the medication on time, which would help the kid sleep an extra 2 hours, which then he would wake up or start having these nightmares. at that point in time. Now, my guess is that he's waking up because there's an actual alarm set at 12 o'clock or at 2 o'clock if you actually are successful in skipping ahead in time. So now with all of this in hand, let's look at 1987 and this kid's current mental state. This kid's current mental state, which is poor already before the incident, and the kid is in an obviously traumatized state, being forced to do stuff he didn't want to do and constantly being scared by his brother. This would probably push him over the edge trauma-wise. So he'd probably be not only taking anti-anxiety medicine, but also he'd probably have a therapist. Now, with trauma that would be going this deep, it would probably be very similar to how hard it is to deal with PTSD. Hard, but not impossible for an adult. But this is a kid who doesn't have the same defense mechanisms as adults do. So he would not be healing very well. If there was any progress, it'd be very slow. Now, looking at that, my theory is that within the box is the therapist's notes, and the only one you'd probably see, or the only important one that you would see, is one dated 4 years in the future from the incident, which would put us at 1987. Now, my guess is that this note would contain instructions for the parents or the guardians that to bring the child back to the source of the trauma. Because he's not healing, he needs to understand that the animatronics are not after him, as they are what has the fear imprinted upon them. So they would probably follow that therapist's advice. But unfortunately, this places him in the same year as the bite of 87. Now, my theory is that this kid was not far along enough in his therapy to be able to handle such a thing. My guess is that was the final straw for this kid. He snapped, and with my guess of that it's the Foxy animatronic that did the bite of 87, he got into said animatronic's face, or any of the animatronics you may believe did the bite. And while it was talking, its mouth would be open, because since they don't have complicated movements, it would just be open if they're talking, closed if they're not. And the animatronic probably got finished with its bit, and the kid was probably still basically in its mouth, because this kid's not thinking in a clear manner anymore, and the jaw would clamp down and finish off what was started in 83. But just another way to prove that the kid wouldn't have a lobotomy in 83 is if we look at the Golden Freddy animatronic exoskeleton, which you can see in Five Nights at Freddy's 1. You get a very clear view of it. Now, if we look at the teeth, they're very round and blunt, because this is the first iteration. It doesn't have those very boxy teeth that the next iteration of Freddy has. Now, if we look at that fact that it has crushing power instead of piercing or cutting power, the damage would be spread throughout the skull. Period. And if we look at the distance from the mouth to the face of the animatronic, that's not too much distance. I don't think that this animatronic could do enough damage to the frontal lobe or any other specific part of the brain that it would require removal. So that would help prove which game theory said the game would be impossible if the kid got a lobotomy. Well, I'm saying this isn't 87. This isn't a lobotomy case. That's the next incident that this kid is unfortunately a victim of. And so that would make the game A, possible, B, everything actually connects. It's all within the parameters of what Scott Cawthon said, that everything is technically within the game. for finding the lore, and that's about it. I mean, the only thing which would want to be buried would be those therapist notes. That would be the only thing wanted to be left forgotten. Was the fact that the therapist doomed this kid to a life of short attention span and fearlessness. And that wraps it up.
Alright, there you have it, guys. The take of FNAF 4 by Soul Courage.
I'll see you all in the next collaboration.
Yes, and I'll see you guys in other videos. Yeah, have a good day and don't do anything reckless. Bye. Click.